and then we'll kick off from there. So basically, we looked at what a project is and the different characteristics, and we said that it has to be smart. Those were one of the major characteristics that we talked about. And then what definition of project management. And then we looked at why we are doing project management, or why project management takes place in the first place. Right. Then we took a look at the different constraints and scope, time, and then resources, more or less cost. And then we broke all of those down and explained all of that and how to balance the three, right?
Okay.
And then we started here, the different 5 phases of project management: initiation, planning, execution, monitoring and control, and then project closure, basically.
Yeah.
Right. We took a look at this. This is usually the first phase. This is where we look at private project charter, feasibility study, identifying the different stakeholders, and then the scope definition. And then we also took a look at the necessary documents that we need. And one of the critical things that we did last week was to take a look at we took a look at how to do a project charter, right? If I remember correctly. I shared that document in the channel. I hope you guys, were able to take a look at it. And yes, so now we'll be moving on to the planning phase. And then we'll start today from planning. Hopefully we'll be able to cover a lot more ground today. And then next week, we can start looking at Agile and a few other things. Are we good?
Okay.
Great. All right, so let's kick off. So, so ideally, what is the planning phase, right? The planning phase is basically where you start putting on your thinking cap and your analysis cap, and you want to start putting a lot of things into place, right? You need to put a lot of details into what it is that you are doing, in the sense that this is where you have something called a project management plan. Basically, what that means is, and we'll take a look at an example, and we'll probably try and practice one in class as well, so you can see how it happens. So basically, this is where you put in all the information that is going to happen inside your plan, right? The scope. Okay. I know we did something earlier called a project charter, right? A project charter is basically high level. That one is mostly for senior management and the rest. But the project management plan is for everybody that will be working on the project, so that they can see what it looks like, right? Okay. That way, so you are going to break it down. I'll show you what the project management looks like. We'll try and tackle one in class as well. Basically, just high level, so that when you come across it, you see what it looks like. So what are the activities, right? So a project plan. So you develop a comprehensive project plan, including scope, including schedule, including resources, budgets, risk management, and quality plans, right? So what that means is we'll also take a look at how to handle risk and how to mitigate risks as well. You'll be putting in your budget. How much is it going to cost? Look at all the angles. If you are going to hire people for this project, what are their salaries? Are they going to need an office space? How much are they going to need? Are you going to be feeding them if they come to the office? Is there going to be a separate project office for them? Are you going to house them, accommodation, and all of that stuff, right? So all of that information will be included in your project management plan, right? Okay. Right. So, and then you're looking at schedule. So we'll also take a look at something called a schedule. A schedule basically means that a plan of how you want to do the project from start to finish. What that means is you want to start, remember we were saying we wanted to start in November, and then one start in October and then end in December. So you are going to put that schedule. So you break down all your tasks, and we'll take a look at that as well. Break down all the tasks and then say when this one is going to be done based on your analysis. So it's a very, very comprehensive document. It's not something that you should be rushed to do, because you have to take your time most times, because you have to finalize all of the different angles that would be that would go into that plan, right? Then you do a work breakdown structure, right? A work breakdown structure is what you do into and this would also go into your management plan. So what that means is, so each of the phases you break them down and then say, okay, in the initiation phase, these are the things that I want to do. I want to write down a project charter. I want to get vendors. I want to get sign off and all of those stuff. And then you break all of those down. I'll also show you a sample and we'll try and see, if we can recreate what a WBS look like. Resource allocation means that, how you want to allocate resources, whether you're going to need a project team, you're going to need people from other teams to join you, or you're just going to be doing that project alone. What is it going to cost if you're going to ask other teams to join? Will you be feeding them breakfast and lunch? Are they going to be in the office throughout? Are they going to be lodged in a hotel throughout that period? And all of those conversations. Then we start looking at risk, right? So the risk basically means that, the things that can go wrong during the project. And like I always tell people, anything can go wrong, right? You have to bear in mind that anything can go wrong. So, but your plan, your work, and your job as a project manager is to try and foresee those things. And to be honest, you might not be able to see all of those things at once, right?
Yes.
But as you go along, you continue to update those risks. There's something we call a risk log or a risk register. I'll show you an example as well. We'll also do like a small example. So, an example of a typical risk is, so take, for example, your work and you're trying to buy something, right? And you budgeted 10,000 or £10 per item, and then you go back 2 days later, inflation has happened, and you find out that the price has gone up, right? That's a risk. There's no way you would have planned for that, because that probably the price hasn't changed in 3 months or in 6 months, and you don't expect it to change. Right, so that would also impact your costs. So that's risk, right? That's a risk that you also have to try and mitigate or plan for. So your option, you now have to sit down and go to management. Look, this is what happened. It used to be $10. It's no longer 10. £10 is no longer 10. It's now 12. We have two options. We can either buy another brand that might be cheaper, but we are not sure of the quality because we've not used it before. Right. So those are the conversations you start having when it comes to risk analysis and risk management. I hope that makes sense.
Yeah, it is.
Good. All right. So we'll show what a risk management plan looks like, and a risk log where you can log, and then what you do and how to categorize risk in terms of high, low, and medium, and the different approaches that you will take to both. Right. So that's our planning phase, right? And then we are going to kick off. Major documents you need a project management plan or a project plan. We'll take a look at that now. You need a work breakdown structure. That basically means that how you want to approach the work for each of the phases, right? The things that you need to do for each of those phases. Then your resource allocation plan, your risk management plan, your cost estimate. Out of this, 3 are the most important, right? Your project plan is very key. Your work breakdown structure is very key, and then your risk management plan is very key as well.
Okay.
All right. So what is a work breakdown structure, right? A work breakdown structure is a view into the project that illustrates the work the project encompasses, right? The project management and the project team use this WBS to develop the project schedule, resource requirements, and cost. There are many ways you can present. Let me show you what the WBS looks like, and take it from there. Share. Where's that document? What's this called? Notice. Yeah. Okay, let me know if you can see my screen.
Yeah.
All right, great. All right, so I'm gonna change this to, I know we wanted to say, we said we wanted to develop what yes, a WBS, but I'm trying to remember the name of the projects that we're trying to run. Yes, an attendance.
Attendance.
Yeah, attendance staff attendance
System.
platform, yeah, system. All right. I mean, there are basically two ways. A lot of people do this, but the most popular one is this, right? This is the popular one. So I'm going to change this to staff attendance. So, right. So this is what a WBS looks like, right? You can see that this has been broken down into the different phases, right? So in the initiation phase, we list everything that we want to do. So we can say the first thing we want to do is we want to do a stakeholder analysis, right? So a stakeholder analysis basically means that the people who are going to benefit and or be impacted by the project, right? Whether it's management, senior management, so that's what the stakeholder analysis.
All the staffs.
Yes, exactly. So it can be staff, it can be senior management, it can be HR team, and all of that stuff, right? So that's the stakeholder analysis. That's what the stakeholder analysis. Then after we've done that, we're going to do our so we can do our vendor selection, right?
Okay.
Our vendor selection means, we've decided that we are not going to do all of that in-house, right? Because we don't have the resources. So we are going to do
procurement.
exactly, we are going to do a procurement, right? So we'll do that. Then after that, we'll now start writing our project charter.
Okay.
And our project charter. I mean, I must warn you, as a project manager, you'll be doing a lot of documentation, right?
Okay.
A lot. It's one of the parts. It's a part of the job that a lot of people don't like. But you do a lot of documentation, a lot of reporting, especially when you do projects that are cross-board or that are cross-functional, right? So, for example, I worked on a project that was a business transformation project, and that meant that I had to report to the GMD.
That's the ERP.
Yes.
Yeah,
I had to. Yeah, you have to report to the GMD. That means you have to, find a plan on how to communicate, when to communicate, and the best way to communicate, right? So they want to see documentation. They want to see that you're on top of what it is that you've been asked to do. So that's just like a small caveat, right? So, then we document our project charter. Once we document it, we submit for review, right? And then we submit for review by project sponsor, right? And once that is done, then we have our charter signed and approved, right? So this is our first step, right?
Okay.
I hope this is clear. Any questions so far that you want me to answer before we go on?
Okay. So in the first column, which is the initiation.
Yes.
So we have the stakeholder analysis.
Yes.
Then the vendor selection.
Yeah.
Then the project charter.
Yeah.
Submit for review by
Yeah,
the project sponsor.
yeah.
Okay. I understand. Okay, go ahead.
I mean, this is not cast in stone, right? So it depends on
Yeah,
the
yeah.
permit me to say comprehensiveness or complexity of your project, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then depends on how big and how heavy the project is. If it's not a heavy project, I mean, you can just it might probably just be 3 steps or 2 steps, right? So
Okay.
by the
Okay.
time you break down those tasks, you'll see um what it's about, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Then the planning, right? So we've concluded this. So basically, this shows you the necessary steps that you need to take. Um, when you're creating your work breakdown structure. Um, and then we start looking at planning, right? So planning, we've said we are going to create preliminary scope statements. Remember what I said about scope, right? Scope means that you need to define what is going to go into the project and what
Okay.
is not going to go
So
into the
project.
project. Exactly. So whenever there's a scope creep or someone wants to change that scope, you show them the document that you have signed, be it the
Yeah.
project charter or the project management plan, to say, look, this was not agreed. We can do
Yeah.
this in version
Yeah.
2 or version 3, but this is what we are going to be delivering for this particular project.
But what if they insist that we need to put this in, we need to incorporate this the new scope into it?
Okay,
What if they insist?
I mean, to be honest, you get those every now and then, right? So 2 things, right? First thing is to try and manage the stakeholder, right? If you've seen that is beyond your control, the next thing you want to do is to escalate to a project sponsor and give him your reasons why you can't achieve that now.
But what if they think that you as a project manager and they're
Yeah,
trying to make you make that modification and you're not willing to accept that modification?
yeah,
Doesn't it doesn't it tend to portray you to be like you're not ready to
to do the
not
work or to
not
deliver.
incompetent or probably not you're not willing to not incompetent though the
You're not
word is
flexible enough.
probably you're not ready to face a challenge or
Yeah, I get what you mean. I mean, so I've had cases like that, and one of the first things that I try to do is try and reason that particular stakeholder and see why, and make them see reason why we cannot, do what it is that they've asked us to do, right? And it could be a number of things. It could be that it would increase the time that you need to deliver that particular project if it's time sensitive, right? It
if
could
it's time
also be
sensitivity, they could make if it's time sensitivity, they could make amendments for probably you guys should have more workforce.
yes, that's right. There's also an option for cost increase, right?
Mm.
If you're hiring more workforce, that means that you need to pay more people, right? Means
Yes.
that what you've told your vendors from the beginning would have to change. And there will be a lot of
Yeah.
conversations. There will be a lot of back and forth. So if you're buying 10 items in the first place, that means you probably need to buy 15 more. Or if this person is saying, I don't want this particular type of phone, I want maybe I want a higher grade or a higher laptop and all of those stuff, right? All of that
Yeah.
conversation, you put your data and your evidence on the table and say, look, this is the pros and the cons of us adding this scope. If we do this, it's not that we don't want to do it, but this is what is going to happen, right? Time would increase, cost would increase, and we'll be over budget, right? So you put those conversations on the table and let the stakeholder decide, right?
Okay.
If that happens, then what that means is you now have to change your project management plan and then your project schedule. The other thing, if you think the stakeholder is just being unrealistic, one of the things I always advise, that's why you should always have a project sponsor, right? So just escalate to your project sponsor and tell him that, look, this is this is what is happening, this is what's going on. So person has requested for this, and then this and yeah, go ahead.
Often, oftentimes is the stakeholder is the um the stakeholders are
Yes.
most times in direct line with the project sponsors. The
Yes.
stakeholders that's probably initiated the reason why the project needs to be established or begin
Yes.
with.
Yes.
Then they thereby they now seek the services of a project manager to oversee the
Yes.
project.
Too good.
So
Yes.
now, in the case of probably they want to add a new thing to the
Yes.
project, which is that falls under the project's
Scope.
scope. Yeah, that falls under
Yeah.
the project scope. Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
But so I think trying to now mitigate with the project sponsor might
Yeah.
not really fall. But I think the most, because I had faced this kind of challenge before.
Mm.
My reason was on that risk assessment plan,
Yeah.
and so and I come to realize that as long as the stakeholders and the project sponsor are on the same page and this is what they want, and I just need to go back to the drawing board and see if it has no impact on the risk assessment.
Yeah.
So
Um. Yeah. I mean, great point, right? And the reason why they've come to you to do the project in the first place is because you're experienced, you know what it is that you're doing, right?
okay,
Right. And the next thing is, so to a large extent, your judgment and your experience should play when you're, putting out these things, right? And then you'll be,
okay,
whatever it is that you're saying, you'll be backing it up with data and information, not that you're just saying it that's from experience from this. I mean, do all your calculations, do all your budgeting, do all your things, and then put it in front of them and then let them make that decision. If they
okay,
decide to go ahead, all well and good, right? Your job as a project manager is to become flexible, is to be as flexible as possible in whatever it is you've been asked to deliver. What that means
okay,
is the project schedule will change, the project plan will change, risk management might also change as well. So you go back to your risk register, or your risk log, and say, look, if we do this, we run a risk of going over budget. So what are we going to do? Are you going to accept it, or are you going to mitigate it, right? So as a project manager, that's entirely your job, right? Being able to maneuver and then make sure that whatever it is that has been. At the end of the day, when you're writing your final project report or closure report, you then put it down and say, during week week so, there was a change in scope by senior management, and there's something we call change request, right?
okay, okay,
I'll show you change request documentation. Change request just basically means that we want this and this and this to be added. You get necessary sign off, and then you include it in your project management plan, and then your closeout report that you give to management at the end of the project.
okay. All right.
Makes sense?
Yeah, it does. Thank you.
Great. All right, great. Yeah, so our planning, so we create a preliminary scope statement. Basically, what we want to achieve with this project. These are the things that we want to do. These are, this is what we are going to do in this particular project, and this is not what is going to be allowed, right? Then we determine the project team. Depending on the kind of organization it is, some people like to have specific project teams. If it's a software development company, or a product company like similar that I already have project teams, right? So I have engineers, I have testers, I have web designers, I have product designers that already work with me, and that's a project team, right? If it's
I,
not,
this will be determined by the project manager.
yes, it will be determined by the project manager. I would also
Okay.
be determined by the type of project that it is that you want to work on. So, for example, if you
Okay.
are not a technical office, maybe you're just an accounting firm, or you're just a someone that just sells, that you just own a business, right?
Okay.
So you don't have that expertise in house, right? What
Okay.
that means is you would have to contact someone or contract that project out to somebody to do. So what you want to
Mm-hmm.
do in that case is you still need to set up a project team. You can say, okay, pick someone from your team, maybe your junior, or maybe someone that reports to you, and then pick someone from the IT team, pick someone from the accounting team, and then pick from someone from the HR team. You have to make requests to the line managers so that that person will know that he's working as an accountant or an IT person or an HR person, but also working on that particular project for that period of time.
Okay, is it allowed that I
Yes,
can pick
yes,
my
of course.
team from what
Yes,
these stakeholders or what the sponsors?
of course, yes.
Okay, as long as they meet my deliverables, right?
Yes, yes. I mean, so my enterprise project was, so I picked people from HR, I picked people from, there was someone from finance. So there are two people from finance because we had tax and then we had normal operational finance. And then we had two people from IT. I had someone from the business side, someone from the credit risk side. We're like 8.
Okay.
And then I had mentioned it to their line managers that, look, based on this project, this is so and so people that I need. And they give me sign off, right? And, those people were balancing, working on their, so those projects, so would have meetings maybe 2 p.m. every day, and they would just give status updates based on tasks that have been assigned to them, right? So if I say, so let's say for the finance person, I can say, look, source for the people that are going to deliver this project. And then we want reports back by Friday when we are giving the status reports to management, right? So that person will go start sending out emails, start doing phone calls. And by Friday or Thursday, when he's giving his reports during the stand-up or during the project status meeting, he already has people that we have listed, right? So when we are doing that status report, we can say, look, we've sourced 4 people and then we've shortlisted up to 4 people. Hopefully by next week, we would have narrowed it down to the people that are based on cost and then based on delivery time and delivery location as well. So most times, depending on the organization, you most likely won't have a predefined project team, right? You would have to pick based on the peculiarity of the project. So take case in point, this particular project that is an HR project because HR wants to be able to use. Obviously, you're going to need somebody from HR.
Departments.
Exactly. You're also going to need from someone from finance because money is going to be involved. You're going to need someone from technology or IT because there are going to be a lot of technology things that maybe hosting and all of those stuff involved, right? So yeah. So typically, that's how it works.
Okay.
Great. So we determine the project team, and then we do a project kickoff meeting. A project kickoff meeting basically means that, we've announced that this project is starting, right? And this is the start date. So we'll tell everybody this is what we want to do.
Okay.
We've gotten sign off from so and so people, and this is what we are going to do. This is when it's going to start, and then this is when it's going to end, right? So that's basically your project kickoff meeting. It's just like when you, when they want to, what's it called? Groundbreaking, right? Maybe someone wants to open a store and then he has bought a land. Exactly. So you just go
Like
there and then you do
inauguration or commission.
exactly. So you do groundbreaking to say, look, we've done land breaking or groundbreaking. This project is going to start on the 10th of January and it will end by December 2025. That's basically what a project kickoff meeting is about.
Okay, sir.
Right. Then they develop the project plan, which we'll see what a project plan looks like. We'll develop a project plan and then we'll submit that project plan for approval, right? And that project plan will also have milestones. Milestones, like I said the other time, is, the small projects that we want to achieve during that, exactly during that project, right? So it can be to have selected vendors by a particular date, to have started design by a particular date, to have gotten the final approval for the design. Basically, just short milestones, small project progress along the way to our project delivery, and then we have that, approved, right? So that's that, and then we come to execution, right? The kickoff meeting, then we verify and validate user requirements. User requirements basically means that what's it called? What management wants to do with that project, or what HR wants to do with that project. By what they want to do, what I mean is this.
The beneficial, how it benefits them.
Exactly, and then what are the things that it should have, or what are the things that it should not have? Should it have a dashboard? Should it have an admin part where you'll be able to see everything at once? More or less like a proper breakdown of the scope that we decided earlier. So when you have that, and then you now take it back to the stakeholders and say, okay, based on the scope that we have, this is the list of 10 things that we are going to be doing in this project. Are we good or we are not good? And now say, okay, we are not good, though. We forgot to add this one. We forgot this one should have this one. Then, there's usually a lot of back and forth when it comes to user requirements, right? But always good, make sure it's documented for purpose, for posterity's sake. Right. And then we have that. Once you have that, then you get a sign off from stakeholders to say, okay, this is okay. This is what we want to do. In this case, it's going to be the HR department because it's their project, they're the project owner. This is what we want to do. Is it okay by you? This is how it's going to look like. Yes, it's fine. Have them sign off. You sign off, and then you store that document or you archive that document. Then you start doing. Yes, go ahead.
To comment. At this point, when you're about to sign off and you've come with all your plans and everything, is it possible that the sponsor or the stakeholder says that they want to vet your process, what you've estimated and everything, that they want to probably involve like a cost controller or a procurement
person? Of course.
Those
things usually come into play whether you like it or not, right? So cost control, because budgeting is always a key part of project management, right? Cost control would always come into play whether you like it or not. Your job as a project manager is to make sure that what you budgeted is what you stay on. If you are going to go above budget, you have to make a change request to say you are going above budget.
Especially to put in check of prices of
exactly
of resources that we use, so that
exactly
the company or the project sponsor won't be overshooting or overestimating the project or overfunding the project.
Yes, exactly. And overfunding is usually an issue when it comes, especially technology projects, right? Sometimes you say, look, we are spending 100,000 on this, £100,000, and then you come back and you see that, look, you are going to overshoot by like 5K or 10K. And those things happen because, especially in the world that we live in, where prices are just changing by the minute, right? So, and what I always tell people to do is when they are doing budgeting is to put in miscellaneous, right? Miscellaneous in terms of, because you never know what can happen, right? So your miscellaneous, I always do between 10 to 15% for my miscellaneous. In the sense that maybe I'm expecting something to be 10K, and then I go to the market, or I'm looking to hire an engineer that is going to, and I've budgeted at most 800, 800K or £500 per day, where you guys are concerned. And then I go, and then he's charging me £550 per day. I can't go back to management and say, look, this person, we budgeted 700, but he now wants to collect 750. So I will be taking that out of my miscellaneous, basically just to cover for. Another thing you can do is always use, so in pricing, you can have an average price and then the higher end of the price, right? So if the lower, so let's say you want to buy something and typically is 10K, right? But based on inflation, you can say, look, let's budget 15K or let's budget 13K. If we have extra at the end of the day, we'll put it back into the project or we'll report it back to management.
But the project sponsor will believe that the project manager will do that, put it back in projects.
Yeah, because you're going to have to provide
the manager will just inflate the price back to.
No. You are going to have to provide receipts, right? And it's going to be part of your project status reports depending on how often you give it. Yeah. So you would say, look, we budget. we've budgeted to hire 5 engineers, and we've, at this particular amount, but we're lucky enough to get it at what's it called? We're looking to get at £500, but we're lucky enough to get it at £400 or £450 per day, right? So we have a overage of £50 over 10 people, right? So that's 500. So that either goes back into, so you put that aside and say, look, that either you keep that for miscellaneous. If anything happens, it goes back into the purse of the company. If there are still things, because it's still within your budget, right? You haven't asked for extra. You've just, you've just been able to negotiate it down to a particular price, and then you were lucky to, to get that sign off. Yeah. So, and then at the end of the day, you will do your financial, breakdown and financial analysis. How much you got, how much you spent, with receipts as well, or with contracts, or with signed off. So management knows that, okay, you are giving so amount, you spent maybe like 5% less or 5% extra, but just make sure that whatever contract or receipts are accompanied in the reports that you are giving.
Okay, another thing that I think we can do again is that
Yes.
probably you can say that the cost of these materials is
Yes.
is time bound for this period. I'm just going to give you probably, if as you can see the project's within 1 or 2 months, then this price
Yeah.
can hold. Then after
Yes.
2 months,
The
then
prices goes up.
yeah, prices how I can say prices are liable to change according
To
to.
change, yeah, exactly, yes.
Yeah, okay,
Yeah,
so that can
yeah,
also be.
yeah. I mean, yes, those are those are things that you can do when you're doing your projects, so that you don't keep going back for changing
You
requests.
understand? And one thing about I don't really like when it comes to issue of the financial parts of it and
Yeah.
having back and forth. I like us to be clear on it, and let's have an understanding that okay, at this moment this is the price, and prices are likely
Mm-hmm.
to change due to market fluctuation and
Yeah.
inflation.
Yeah.
So you should take
I
note
mean,
of
those are so pricing in project management can be sensitive, right?
that.
And as a project manager, you also need to be careful.
Mm-hmm.
A handful of people have lost their jobs because they think that, they're siphoning funds, or they are overinflating prices,
Yes, exactly.
or yeah, or they are bringing in their own vendors to supply stuff, right? So I mean, you
Mm-hmm.
want to be as discreet and as open as possible. What I usually do when it comes to, especially when it comes to vendors, is what I do. So two things I do, right? I usually ask stakeholders and project sponsor if they have a what's it called, a specific vendor.
Okay. Okay.
Yet I do that. One. Two is, if they don't have anyone, the other thing that I do is what we have a cost management plan that says that you should get at least 3 invoices, right? Or 4 invoices. That way you can, and then that decision will not be taken by you. What you are doing is you are putting those invoices in front of stakeholders or the project owner or the
Price
project
one, price
sponsor.
two, price three.
Exactly. And say, look, these are the pros and cons for each of these prices. We do not have a specific favorite, and you are asking for the decision of either the project team or the project owner or the project sponsor, to give you that, to give you the go ahead for which vendor to choose to deliver that particular project or contract. That way it keeps you safe, right? And then you don't get your hands muddy in stuff like that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay. Thank you.
All right.
All right.
Yeah. All right. So, start designing. You get your product designers to start putting those things in place. They'll put in, so depending on if you want to use Figma or Adobe Photoshoot, if you are contracting this out as well, because you already have the user requirements, your user requirements will contain things like the kind of color we want there to be the logo, all of those things, and then those
Okay.
things will start to be in play, right? So you put a design system in place. Once that is done, if you need to buy hardware and software based on what we've been talking about, you start to buy those hardware. If you need to buy an in-house server, you buy an in-house server. If you need to buy a private server, you buy a private server, whether it's from AWS or Azure or wherever it is. But those costs will be already put into your cost management plan. Then hopefully that will be done. The system would have been developed. Then you start to test, right? Testing means that testing basically means that based on the requirements that the project owners have given you, it meets those requirements. So if they said that it should do this, when they are testing, they should be able to see that those things are those things have been embedded in what they've told you to do. So you would have a use test case, right? Users should be able to log in. Yes, they tick it off. Users should be able to check overall view. Yes, this can do this. They tick it off. If it doesn't have that, what will now happen is they'll tell you, okay, out of 10 things that we told you to do, we were only able to see 8, right? So what you now do is, okay, you're able to see 8. The 2, that means you have 2 outstanding. What that means is you now go back to your engineers or the people that have designed the system and say, look, based on the user requirements that we have, 2 is missing. Then they now go back, continue to fix the 2. Once that 2 is done again, it now comes back to the users again to start testing, to say, okay, you told us 2 were missing. We've done the 2 now. Now what you can do is go back again and check if everything you've asked us to build has been incorporated into the system. So, you give it to a few users, both internal, both product owners. I mean, the project owner can now nominate a few people to test based on the things that you've asked it to do. And those are the people that are going to give you the feedback. Once that is done, and then you are good, then you now deploy that application onto your live servers, whether a physical server in the office, and then a live server or a live server in the cloud, right? That is deployed, then you do a user training. The people that have built the system will now do a user training for the people that are going to use the system, right? It's like you bought a car, but you don't know how to drive it. So you get a driver, someone that knows about cars, to teach you how to drive or to teach you how to use, that particular vehicle, right? Once that is done and you get a sign off, that usually happens within 1 to 3 weeks of product or project completion, right? And then you go live. Go live means that everybody will now start using the application that you have. Exactly, the application that you have deployed.
Okay.
Right. So your control part is your project status meetings. Basically, that means that so in your project management plan, you decide how you want to be reporting, whether once a week, you choose the day, maybe Fridays, 2 p.m., Fridays, 4 p.m., so that, or Mondays, because maybe work goes on during the weekend, right? So you choose a date and then you report that. You decide who and who are going to be in those report meetings, whether you just want to be sending a document so that everybody sees where the project is, or you're going to have you're going to have like a proper meeting. And that the other thing, what most people do is, I usually have, when I was doing core project management, I usually have meetings on Mondays, so that whatever questions you want to ask, I'm ready for it, and I can tell you what we are doing for the week, right? But what I do is I send in that report on Friday before close of business. So whatever question you want to ask, you can go over it over the weekend, and then on Monday you can ask your questions, and then I can provide you with, proper.
Don't you work on Saturday?
Sorry?
Don't you work on Saturday?
So I used to, but fortunately for me, so the kind of work I do now is, if there's an issue, maybe there's something wrong with production, or users are having problems, but not work. It will probably just be maybe a server is down, we need to fix it. Users can't send money, find out what's going on. And so we have different channels where customer experience reports when there's an issue, and then we pick it up, right? And then once that issue has been fixed, we just let them know, and then everybody is back to normal.
Okay, sir.
Yeah. Um,
Oh,
I mean, we talked about risk management. We take a look at that. Then we also talked about, updating your project management plan as you go along. Um, then you close out, you audit your procurement, you document the lessons learned from that particular project. What you did well, what you didn't do well. You update your files and records. You and then you close out. You write your final project report, what you did on the project. If there's going to be a project phase, or if there's going to be version 2, when that version 2 is going to start, and then the things that are going to be put in that version 2. You write that document and then you give it to your project sponsor. Same way you wrote your project charter, give it to your project sponsor, the rights, project owners, and then they sign off, check that everything is good. Get your proper projects. You also document a project support plan in the sense that if there are issues with the application that you built, if people can't sign in, how long it will take you to respond,
okay.
or if there a channel that they can always post their issues and then someone will pick it up. You want to document all of those as well. Once that
Okay.
is done and that has been signed off, and then you archive that document, but you can always go back to pick it whenever whenever there's an issue.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's basically what a work breakdown schedule looks like. Basically, the things that you need to do in the project. So that's a work breakdown schedule.
Okay.
Yeah. Any questions so far before we go ahead?
Okay. Everything's understood.
Great.
Okay. All right.
All right. I think we usually have like a 5-minute break. I'm not sure if Darren is still here. Hi, Darren. Are you still with us?
Okay. If
Hi,
I'm the
Darren.
only one,
Yes.
if I'm the only one, I would just suggest you to carry on because at this time I don't want to have a break. If I have a break, I might shut down.
Okay. All right. No problem. That's fine. All right. So,
But
I mean,
but I'm the only one. But if not, if other people wants the break, then we can have the break.
I think we have Busola in class. Hi, Busola. I know you said you can't speak. Are you okay with like a 5-minute break? You can just type in the chat room and then,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's just 5 minutes. So this is 11:58. We can come back at 12:04, give or take.
Okay.
Hi, Busola. Okay, just in case.
Okay. Let's just observe the break then.
Okay, so 12:04 will be back. I'll be here anyway, so just 12:04.
Okay. All right. Great.
Great. All right, I think we can kick off.
Okay.
Wait, just a second.
All right.
Okay, let me share my screen. So. Let me know if you can see my screen now.
Okay, I can see the work breakdown structure.
Yeah. All right. So so that's an example of what we just looked at is an example of a work breakdown structure. Right? So next bit is we're going to be taking a look at risk management, and risk management is very critical when it comes to what's it called, project management, because you want to be able to find out whatever exactly is going to be an issue when you're doing your project. And like I said, things would always happen, right? Whether we like it or not, right? It's your job as a project manager to be able to resolve and to mitigate or plan ahead. You will not be able to plan for everything, right? But do your best to plan for all the likely scenarios when handling the project. Okay. So a risk is an event or condition that, if it occurs, could have a positive or negative effect on a project objective, right?
Okay.
Risk management is a process of identifying, assessing, responding to, monitoring, and controlling, and then reporting risk. So like I said, things would always happen, right? Your job is to basically just, get ahead of it and then see how you can mitigate risk. So in project management, what are the roles and responsibilities when it comes to risk? For the business, it would help you to identify and determine the context, consequence, impact, timing, and priority of the risk, right? So basically, you'll be working as a project manager, you'll be working with the business as well. So business basically just means the other stakeholders, right?
Yeah.
So that's what business people that will be impacted mostly by the project. As a project manager, the risk manager or PM determines if the risk is unique, identifies risks and dependencies across projects, verifies if the risk is internal or external to the project. You assign the risk classification and tracking number during the life of the project, and then you continue to monitor the project or potential risk. What that means is, because you've identified the risk, doesn't mean, and then you figured it out, doesn't mean that's the end, right? Sometimes, and in most cases, often than not, you have to make sure that till the end of the project, you're watching that risk, right?
Okay.
So case in point is, let's use the issue of cost, right? And an example would be, look, I've done, I've been able to, we're not able to get someone for £500, but we're able to get someone for £550, right? And then you guys have signed so you're signing like a month-on-month contract, which typically happens. And then the person that finished work for week one, for month one, and then month two, he comes back to you and says, Abdurrahman, I don't want to collect £500 again. I want to collect £600. That's a risk. That's a risk on its own, right? And then you need, so what in those cases like that, you want to be able to mitigate and say, look, you're not signing a 1 month contract, we're going to sign a 3 month contract. So that that way there will be no need for you to be hassling up and down about changing prices or changing, changing daily rates, right? Or it could be a government policy, it could be an employee policy to say that, look, there's a limit to how much information you can collect when you are getting people's information, and you'll be getting that information with the data that you'll be collecting, right? So, so throughout the project, you want to continue to monitor all the risks that you've been assigned or that you've assigned or that you've identified and classified, and to make sure that those risks don't change form or become worse as time goes on.
Okay.
Yes. So the project team is responsible for identifying the risk as well, the dependencies of the risk within the project, context and consequence of the risk. They're also responsible for determining the impact and timing and priority of the risk, as well as formulating the risk. So you and the project team are more or less one. So it's your team's job and your job to be able to identify those risks and then be able to classify them. Right. So your risk owner is basically the person who's so for example, if there's a risk around cost going up, that might not be your spare. Maybe you've assigned that task to the HR person because those people have to sign contract and all of those stuff, right? So you want to continue to follow up with the risk owner to find out, okay, what's happening? Are we okay with this risk? Are there any issues? Is there anything that you should be informed about? Do we need to escalate? So for example, a risk might be from the technology team, maybe where you are resided, and you need to keep telling your assistant, look, let's know if there are any downtimes, if there are any issues with uptime, or there are any issues with electricity, those kind of conversations. It's not going to be on your table, but whoever you've assigned that risk to, right, should always continue to monitor and report on that risk. It can be reported either on a weekly basis, depending on the severity, or it can just be reported, just put it in the risk log and then continue to follow up on whenever necessary. For other key stakeholders, the other key stakeholders in identifying and determining the context, consequence, impact, timing, and priority of the risk, right? So risk identification. So risk identification basically just means you identifying, just one of these few examples that we've just done, right? So risk identification will involve the project team, appropriate stakeholders, and we include an evaluation of environmental factors, organizational culture, and project management plan, including the project scope, schedule, cost, or quality. What that means is everything should be put on the table, whether it's likely to occur or whether it's not likely to occur. Your own is to make sure that you've identified all the necessary risks that has been placed that you think can happen.
Okay.
Whether it's earthquake. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
One can just outline possible risk in that.
Exactly.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
Yeah. So whether it's earthquake, whether it's the company going bankrupt, whether it's fraud,
power,
whatever.
It could be finance.
It could be power. It could be finance.
Whatever
it is.
It could be the personnel.
It could be personnel. It could be someone saying, "Look, I'm not doing this job again. I've gotten a better offer." It could be anything. The risk in that means that you have to start looking for somebody else to fill in the gap. It could be government policies. It could be stakeholders saying, "Look, they're not putting money in the business anymore."
Mm-hmm.
Whatever it is, right? Your job is to document those things and say, "This is the possible. This are different types of risk," and then later you now start to classify them. We'll look at how to classify in a bit, right? So, how do you do that? So you do brainstorming with your team members, with stakeholders. You do interviewing as well. You can interview project sponsors, potential stakeholders, anybody that you think can have an insight or information for you to use. You also do a SWOT analysis. I'm sure you're familiar with the SWOT analysis. You look at the strengths, we look at the weaknesses, and then the opportunities and threats. So your risks might probably come from the weaknesses and then the threats as well. So you want to be able to look at all those as well. You also look at diagramming. Diagramming basically just you doing some sort of workflow, right? What can happen at this particular point? If it doesn't happen at the initiation phase, what can happen in the execution phase? What can happen in the project planning phase? what can happen with cost, what can happen with time, what can happen with resources. Just putting everything into a workflow. You can use different diagramming methods, and a typical example is Miro, and then you can start to see, what makes sense out of all of that, right?
Okay.
So those are ways you identify risk. Like I said, put everything on the board, and then you can now start to classify them, accordingly, right? And how do we classify it? Or how do we analyze, right? And then we now come to risk analysis. Risk analysis means that the probability and impact of occurrence for each identified risk will be assessed by the project manager with the input from the project team using the following approach, right? So you put everything down, right? You put all of your risks down. You put everything on a piece of paper or on the board, depending on where you're having the conversation. And then you now start looking at the probability, right?
Okay.
If a probability of 70%, then that risk is high, right? If it falls between 30% and 70%, then that risk is medium, right? If it falls between 30% and below, that risk is low. An example of low is an earthquake in the US, in the UK. It literally hasn't happened. Can't remember if it's ever happened before. But that's low, right? The impact will be huge if it happens because
Yes,
it's a natural disaster. But the probability means that you're not sure what the probability is, right? Because so you can then start to dig into data and say, look, what's the data that is going to happen when it comes to earthquakes? Have we had earthquakes in the past 1 year, 2 years, or 3 years? Or have we had flooding in this area for the past 2, 3 years, right? So if you look at, and then, so an example of high might be a senior engineer resigning from his job, the job that or your assistant resigning, right? Probability of that happen. Maybe you know that he's been interviewing, or he's an engineer that is in high demand. Probability that happens is high, because you know that a particular engineer is in high demand, right? And if that happens, what will the impact be? The impact will be high, because you'd have to basically go back and start looking for an engineer to do the work that you have asked him to do. Right? Does that make sense, Abdullah?
Very well, yeah, I understand.
If you're speaking, I can't hear you.
I said yes, very well. Yes, it makes sense. I understand.
Yeah. Yes. So so that's basically so you look at the different probabilities: high, medium, and low. Once you've looked at that, you now start to look at the impact, right? Is the impact going to be high, right? What does high mean? It means that risk that has the potential to greatly impact the project cost, project schedule, or performance. So take example, the one for the engineer that we just talked about leaving, right? It's definitely going to impact the project schedule, because imagine the time that you would have to now start looking for a new engineer. A new engineer, right? Or and then you're not sure that the new engineer you get will probably charge you the same. He might probably say he wants more money, right? So the probability is high, and then the impact is probably, high as well. Right. Medium. What does medium mean? Risk that has the potential to slightly impact project cost, project schedule. It would affect it, but it won't totally derail it. You might be able to, you might be able to quickly maneuver yourself. Or maybe an example might be, what's it called? A downtime on one of your servers, right? In that case, what you might be doing is probably have a physical server that people can test on, or in the meantime that particular server is down. The way it might affect it is if it happened at night and no one is aware until morning, right? So people might not be able to test until later in the day before you now start to set up your server. It has impacted it, but it hasn't impacted it by, a high, yeah, exactly. Yeah. Low means that risk that has the relatively little impact on cost, schedule, or performance. So what you typically do is have a table like this, right? And then you start to put, you can use Excel to do this and put your what's it called? Your data across here, and then you start to classify. Is this high? And what's the probability? And then what's the impact? You put it here. So that once you start doing this, you now start looking at how to mitigate or how to respond to that, which is what we are going to look at next, right?
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So once you've identified the risk, you now want to decide, what is the risk response to each of those, the risks that you've classified, right? Yeah. And there are typically 5 types, right? The first type is to avoid, right? Is to eliminate the threat or condition to protect the project objectives from its impact by eliminating the cause, right? So case in point is your server being down, right? So for that case, you want to say, I'm going to avoid it as much as possible by doing what? By either having a backup server so that whatever happens, people would always be able to test, or engineers would always be able to work.
Okay.
Right. So that's the way to avoid, right? 2 is to mitigate, right? So this is to identify ways to reduce the probability or the impact of the risk, right? Mitigate means that even if it happens, the effect will not be so much felt, right? It's the same way why people use seatbelts, right? And so if you have an accident, your seatbelt is there, and then the airbags are there as well to put. That's a way of mitigating, because, like I said, things would always happen. Your job as a project manager is to make sure that whatever happens, the project doesn't suffer, a great deal, right? You also, by putting a business continuity plan in place, right? 3 is to accept, right? Accept means that there's nothing you can do about it. So let's say you've said that you want to hire engineers by the end of October, but you've been asking people, you've even headhunted, but people are not accepting the offer. There's little or nothing you can do about it, right? You have to accept it, and you have to document that in your risk register, right? Contingency, so define actions to be taken in response to the risk. So case in point might be, maybe in the case of a flood, you might say, look, you need to have a business continuity plan. So a business continuity plan might mean that you don't do physical servers, you do virtual servers. Exactly. You do on cloud. You don't do on premise, or even if you do on premise, you don't put it in your office, right? You do something we called, I'm sure you're familiar as well, called co-location, where where a lot of companies have their servers, and because exactly, so you can do stuff like that. The final one is transfer. Transfer means that you are shifting the consequence of a risk to a third party together with ownership of the response by making another party responsible for the risk. So, e.g., so for example, in the case of you're trying to outsource, right, or an engineer leaving, if you've outsourced your engineering, it doesn't concern you about that. Your own is that someone has to be working on that project. Right, exactly. So whether the person leaves or whether the person doesn't leave, it doesn't concern you. Your own bit is that you've transferred that risk or that uncertainty of you starting to look for engineers. You've transferred that risk to an outsourcing firm to say, look, how you guys want to do it is not my business. But the only thing that we know that somebody has to always be on ground to work on this particular project.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
It does.
Great. All right. And then finally, we have risk controlling, monitoring, and controlling. Like I said, risk will be assigned a risk owner. who will track, monitor, and control and report on the status and effectiveness of each risk response according to the project manager and the project management team. As a risk event occurs, the list could be reprioritized during weekly reviews, like I said, and risk management plan will reflect any and all changes to the risk list, including secondary and residual risk. So like I said, you want to continue to monitor your risk as you go on a weekly basis to make sure that there are no issues. If there are issues, there's an appropriate response plan in place so that it doesn't affect the project.
Progress.
The progress of the project, right?
Okay.
So your job as a project manager is to continue to review, evaluate, and modify the probability and impact of each risk item. Some people do 2 weeks, some people do 1 week, depending on on whatever it is that you're comfortable with. But you need to set that agenda up to say every week we'll take a look at all the risks and see which ones have changed, which one we've mitigated, and all of that stuff, right? Excuse me. Analyze any new risks that are identified and add these items to the risk list or a risk database or a risk log. Monitor and control the risks that have been identified. Review and update the top 10 risk list time frame as needed every 2 weeks, etc. If anything is beyond your control, the appropriate action is always to escalate to senior management or to the project sponsor
Project sponsor, as the case may be now.
Yeah, as the case may be. So that way you're not waiting until things have gone really bad, right?
So basically, you want to just document it and send it as a report.
Yes.
For reference purpose, so that's all.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. So you want to document and then send it as a report. For the risk owner, the person will help develop the risk response and risk trigger and carry out the execution of the risk response if a risk event occurs. Because that person is a risk owner. So say in case your HR manager or your junior IT staff, that person has to continue to monitor. And when you've told them what to do, their job is to carry out that, that transaction and get that thing, get that stuff done.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So participate in the review, reevaluation, and modification of the probability and impact for each risk item on a weekly basis. Identify and participate in the analysis of any new risks that occur. Person should also escalate to the PM, and then that person can also escalate to the project sponsor or the project owner. Rules and practices is usually we have a risk management log that will maintained by the project manager. But you should always review that during your meeting, right? During your project status meeting. Always share where you are with risk so that some people even put it in the risk report, in the status report, but it depends on you, right? You can either put it there or you can just have a separate document for it. And then you can always close risks, right? If that risk is no longer valid. If that risk event has occurred and you've moved on, or it is no longer considered a risk, right? You can close that risk and say, we are closing this risk, this based on so, and that risk is closed. Let me quickly show you an example of a risk register. Just a second. But let me know when you can see this. Let me know, can you see this?
Yes.
All right, so this is an example of a risk of a risk log. So you can see the project name, center, the project manager's name, the project description. We've seen that this is still open, right? So we have open and closed, current status, open, close. The risk impact. Remember we talked about the different types of impacts. Is it going to be high, right, or medium or low? What's the probability of occurrence, right? So these are different risk impacts that we have. what's the probability of occurrence? Is it low, medium, or high, right? Risk map, yellow means that, based on that diagram that we just shared. So what's the description? What's the risk description? Current project skill miss. Sorry.
Okay. The sign of the
Exactly. Of
okay.
the map, on that particular map that we shared.
So it means that it's maybe a medium priority.
Exactly. Yes. The probability of occurrence is low. The impact will be high, but the probability will be low. So your map will be yellow. That's what it means. Yeah, so so this is the description. The current project skill set may not be adequate to complete all project work. The current development team has been working on in a Windows 2K environment, and the current requirements are for a Linux environment. This is a risk on its own, right? They are used to working on Windows, but the project needs what a Linux environment for you to be able to work, right? Exactly. The project schedule will require 1,500 development hours of a skilled Linux operator and approximately 1,900 to 2,000 if we retrain. So they have two options, right? Either to change the personnel that they have, or get in someone that knows about Linux, or they retrain, their existing staff.
Okay.
They retrain their existing staff to be able to use Linux, right? So that's the description of the risk. What's the impact? If required skills are not identified or obtained, project schedule may slip and possibly restrict the accomplishment of project goals. So this is the impact of that particular project, right? What area is this risk affecting? Resources, because obviously money is involved, right? And then the budget. The person also mentioned here that schedule, right? It means that the schedule is going to change. Why? Because if we get one person, if we get a Linux person, the person will finish it in 1,500 hours. But if we have to retrain people, it will cost us 1,900 hours or 2,200 hours. That is going to impact what? The schedule or the overall schedule of the project. Exactly. And then symptoms, the trigger, the response strategy is mitigation, right? So find internal resources that meet required skill sets or train existing sources. So what they're saying is, I'm still go within the organization and find people that can use Linux, right? They want to mitigate it. That's their mitigation plan. The contingency plan is find resources that meet required skill sets or through external hiring. If this does not work, then you go and find an external person that can quickly do Linux and you get your job done. Right. So this is an example of a risk log. I'll share this with you as well. And we can see what a risk log looks like. Yes. So that's risk, right? Just before we go, we're going to take a look at the project management plan. We share a template. We'll quickly try and walk through that, and we would. So I'm trying to see which makes sense. Should we do that today, or we go through the execution phase?
Let's go to the execution phase.
Okay, all right. Then next week we can take the project management plan in detail.
Yeah.
All right. So what's the execution phase? Execution means that you're about to start the work. So all of that paperwork that you've done, right? You're going to take a small break from all of that. The execution phase is where the project plan is put into action. And what are the key activities? Task execution. You carry out the project work according to the project plan and the work breakdown structure. So all those things that we are going to see next week based on our project plan and our work breakdown structure. We are going to start testing, we are going to start designing, we are going to start building the application.
Basically designing.
Exactly. Designing, implementing everything that we've set out to do, right? We are going to start doing all of those things. Resource management, we're going to start managing and allocating resources efficiently. You have to cut out waste, make sure you are lean as much as possible, cut out unnecessary waste, no time wasting, make sure things are done on schedule. If we need to deliver a particular feature by Friday, we need to make sure that that feature is ready by Friday for demo, right? Quality control, ensure that work is performed to meet the project's quality standards. So the quality that you've set at the beginning of the project should always, quality is always an issue, right? And the reason is because...
That's why I agreed with the sponsor of the project also. Because
yes,
oftentimes when you're trying to go for higher quality, it might seem as if your price is higher too.
Exactly.
I understand.
Yes, so I mean, so quality is always key. You always make sure that you don't you do not compromise on quality. Yes, go ahead.
So I think at this point there has to be a lot of transparency in the procurement and also
exactly
the financial parts, so that
exactly.
if you give the business owner the opportunity to also source for materials according to your own specifications and recommendations.
Exactly. So I mean, that's very, very spot on, right? There has to be a lot of transparency. There has to be the quality of engineers that you are employing on that project must be spot on. You don't want to develop an app and 3 months down the line, you're continuing to have issues, right?
Which I believe that over time, then one cannot have a very strong foot in terms of negotiation and determine the quality of materials.
Fantastic. Yeah. So that's it, right? You want to make sure that the people that are on the project, on your project, have been vetted enough so that there are no issues.
Yeah.
They have to be properly vetted. They have to uphold the highest quality of standards so that there are no issues for you as a project manager, down the line.
Hey, there's something I want to quickly say.
Yes, sir.
Sometimes one of the fundamental issues that one faces that one will face as a project manager is the issue of price and the cost of the project. Now, sometimes in life one grows in stages, and one will attain a stage whereby you can say this is your yes and this is your no, and you're not compromising. But at the 13th stage whereby you're still growing, simply because you don't want to lose the project, is it advisable that one should now tend to compromise and try to do some modifications in terms of quality, not to drop the standard of the project, but at least the project could have been better, but because of the fact that you also the project manager doesn't want to lose the project, then decided to compromise on the price and try to look for a lesser material that can accommodate the low cost which the project sponsors are putting forward.
I mean, so when it comes to, like I said earlier, when it comes to pricing and negotiation and finances, where projects are concerned, I mean, as a project manager, it can be tricky for you, especially when there are other parties involved, right? Especially like a project sponsor. And in a country like ours, it can be tricky as well because, the person that owns the project is telling you that this is the vendor that I want you to supply this particular materials for the project, right?
Whether the vendor is even
qualified or not, right? It doesn't matter, right? But in a place like the UK that you are, excuse me, what usually happens is those vendors are properly vetted, right? And you won't get, and then they will have to sub. So what they usually do is they'll submit contracts, they'll submit quality standards, and then you guys will sign off on quality standards as well.
Okay.
So I once worked on a project when I was at Royal Bank of Scotland for to install some CCTV cameras, and I mean all the documentation was there. They showed us all the documentations, the quality standards, and everybody that submitted their contracts or their bill of lading or whatever it is that they submitted, everybody had quality sign-offs and everybody had stamps and all of those things were there. So the choice was basically yours in terms of pricing or whatever it is that you decide to, make your decision based on, right? So nobody was influencing anything. And when we eventually did pick one, there was a contract that was signed, and there were penalties if the person, delivered items that were not up to quality or not up to standard. And there was also after support or after sales support of like a year, right? So I mean, so those are the things you want to put in place when you're doing stuff that has to do with vendors and contractors. Make sure that, and that same happens in the US as well, right? So you want to put all of those things in place. Make sure that this, the documentation is, and then they have certificates. Yeah, that's what I was trying to remember. They have certificate of quality. They have the necessary certificate of quality to deliver those things. And that's what you want to make sure that you have. So that when push comes to shove, and there's also a penalty for whoever deviates from the quality that you requested for, right? So those are the things you want to put in place. The minute you put that in place, you are more or less secured or safe as a project manager, and you know that, whatever happens, the contractor will be the ones. And that way you've transferred the risk, right, away from yourself to the vendor. And he or she knows that, they'll be the one to bear the burden if they deliver less than quality.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So change management, right? And I know we touched on that earlier. Change management basically means that you address and manage any changes or deviations from the project plan. What that means is if things are, I remember we were talking about scope change and all of that stuff, right? So there's something we call change management, right? So change management means it's a document where whoever wants to make that change will write that document, gets it signed off by the appropriate stakeholders and then the project sponsor, and then get it approved by someone we call a change board. Right? Change board is usually handled by the project sponsor. Most times you might not be there because you'll be biased. So they usually don't put the project manager. So they'll probably put the key stakeholders, maybe project sponsor, and a few other key stakeholders. The tricky part with change board is if the person who needs the change to happen or the scope to happen is friends with the change board, I mean, you will literally have little or no say. Yeah, where that is concerned.
The influence on that from their side over you.
Exactly. So so those things happen from time to time. Right. So so change. So when there's a change, that change approval document is signed, it gets to change board. They look at the pros and the cons, the risk, the budgets, how it would affect all of that. If they're okay with it, they sign it off, it's handed over to you and you implement, right? If they're not okay with it, you continue with your work and you deliver as at when due. Right. Then the communication plan. A communication plan basically means that how you want to communicate to stakeholders, right? It could be, like we said earlier, via emails. So I used to, so currently in my place of work, we have, so we do Friday updates, right? So we do Friday updates through Slack. I'm sure you've heard of Slack. So we do Friday updates. So we do like what we've done for the week, what we are going to do for the next week, and the rest, right? But for our daily update meetings, we do use Google Meet. So so those are the things that you want to document as well. You say, look, we're going to be having weekly meetings with project team members, and that's going to happen weekly, whether physical or virtual. in this space of work from home, so will most likely be virtual meetings, right? So you can say maybe every day or every other day or every 3 days. You can say Monday, Wednesday, Friday at 2 p.m. The people that will be there will be via Zoom or via Slack or via Google Meet.
Mm-hmm.
Or for status updates, for people that you need to keep informed, you can just schedule like a meeting. So I have a meeting with my CTO every 2 weeks. We have like a bi-weekly meeting. So I just give him updates, what's going on. But if I need to reach him, I just reach him on Slack to say, look, I have an issue. I need your help to help me resolve it whenever I need to escalate and things like that. So you want to set out a communication plan to say, this is how we are going to be doing things. This is how things are going to be done. This is how we are going to communicate to stakeholders, to, if you want to do a demo, you can send out an email, send out a Google invite, or send out a Teams invite and put all of that information there and say, look, yeah, so we have a demo for this project. Please see invite, blah, blah, blah. And you set, put in the agenda for the meeting and all of that. Because stakeholders don't usually like coming for meetings. So what you want to do is just, write your email, put the agenda, and then always put an agenda so they know what it is that you want to talk about.
Okay.
Right. Always make sure you put an agenda so that people are not saying, why did they call this meeting? What's this meeting for? And all of that stuff. So it always makes your life a whole lot easier. Right. Yeah. So that's the execution phase. To document, you need progress reports. Like we said, I do have. So what we'll do next week would have a look at the project plan, then also a sample of a project report that I usually use as well. Then change request, like we said. I think I'll also dig up this as well, so that you can see what it looks like. I'll also share you those templates. Resource utilization records, communication plan, and all of. So those are the type of documents you need during the execution phase. So we'll take this for. Okay, all right. So the monitoring and the controlling phase, right? This phase involves continuous monitoring and control of the project's performance to ensure that it stays on track, right? So basically, this is where you are making sure that there are no issues with your project, is going on according to plan. The right people are you are not spending more money than you should be spending. You've not hired more than enough people. The quality of what has been delivered has met the right standard and stuff like that. So what are the key activities, right? So progress tracking, continue to monitor project progress compared to the project plan. What that means is you've set out a project plan, right? And then you've also, and what it is. So actual versus projected. So you projected that by week 4, you are going to be in a particular place, right? So when you now get to week 4, you're now going to check, are you in the place that you said that you will be in that particular month, right? So that's progress tracking. Let me see. I think I have a document here that I can show. Okay, yes, let me just quickly share this with you. Just a second. Yeah, let me know if you can see this.
Yeah, I can see.
All right, so you can see that we said it will start. This is our start date. This is our due date. So for each of the things that you want to do, you put a start date and then you put an end date to it. So, and then the number of days that you want to, the number of days that you want to, that it will take to complete all of those things. So this is more or less like your project schedule, and then you are using this to track whatever it is, that you are doing. You can also see that there's a percentage completed here. So have we completed this? Yes. Have we completed this? Yes. Have we completed this? This is not completed. It's still in progress, right? So I mean, those are the things that you want to continue to monitor. So you can see that this is phase 1. These are the number of days it will take. What we'll do in phase 2, and then what we'll do in phase 3 as well. There's also another one. Let me open that as well. There's also this. I'll share more than happy to share this with you as well. So this yeah. So there's this you see your project name, project date. Is the project on track? If it's not on track, you can put say on track. How many percentage have we completed? 27%. So these are the tasks that we decided to do. Set kickoff meeting, you've assigned this to this person. Agree on objective, detailed request, hardware request, resource plan, staffing, and all of those. So you can see this is complete, this is complete, this is complete, this is overdue. Overdue means that there's a probability that that task will not be done on time, right? In progress.
Okay.
And then you have a Gantt chart of the days that you were meant to deliver all of those, all of those projects. So you see our task. So overall task product, complete, overdue, in progress, not started. Then we have our budgets, right? This is what we planned to spend. We plan to spend 80,000, but we've only spent, so far, we've spent what, 50,000. So we are still on track. We haven't gone, above budget. So, I mean, these are some of the templates that you can use to monitor your project as you go along. Okay, so monitoring and controlling. Then quality control, we spoke about quality control earlier. Ensure that quality standards are maintained and then there are no issues with quality. Issue resolution. You would always have issues as you go along, right? And that's a given. I mean, I resolve issues pretty much every day. There's issue with production, there's issue with server. A customer has complained. This is like the 5th customer that have complained about this particular issue. We need to quickly fix it. We need to quickly resolve it. Stuff like that, right? And your job as a project manager is to be able to, get on top of those things and then have it resolved, right? So risk management, be able to respond and solve, resolve each risks on a steady basis, and then change control as well. Like I said, you would always have issues that needs to be changed, and your job is to make sure that those things are resolved as you go along. Monitoring and controlling phase. So documents you need, project status, issue log, like we shared, issue risk register, change control documentation, quality control methods, and yes, so that's our monitoring and controlling phase. Any questions so far? I think we have just one more phase before we call it a day.
Okay, everything is fine, and I hope this this teaching will also be shared to us later.
Yes. I think the last one was shared. So yes, I'll share the slides after we are done with this part of the class as well. So.
Okay, please do so that I can also revise what I wake up.
What you've learned. Yeah. So your closing phase basically just means that you are done with the project, and you've so your key activities are the formal acceptance from the project owner, the person that hired you to work on the project. So you sign the document, then you do a handover to the project owner, then you make sure all the documentation are properly done, and then you also write in documents learned as well, right? Documents learned are things that you learned on the project, the issues that you had, and then how you were able to resolve them. It can just be like a 1 or 2 pager, and then that's basically it, right? And then closing phase, right? So the documents that you need, formal acceptance documents, sign off, your project closure reports, your formal lessons reports, and then the final documentation, right? So that's basically it. So that's the process of start, initiation, and then to closure of a project. So next week, what we will do is we'll take a look at, writing a project management plan, and then we can see how it's like. And we'll also look at the role of the project manager, skills that you need, and then the different, frameworks for project management, waterfall and Agile, and then we should start to take a look at Agile, project management, and Scrum from next week.
Okay, all right.
I mean, thank you for joining the class. Let me know if there are any questions. Please feel free to drop me a question in the chat whenever you have any question. But I know Dave will share this video with everybody. And once at the end of next week, we'll share this the documentation as well for you guys to take a look at.
All right. Thank you very much.
Great. Enjoy your weekend and get some rest.
Okay, I will right now. Thank you very much, Mr. Afroluwa. God bless you.
Cheers.
Yes, sir.